All right, well, let's get started. I want to welcome everybody to the monthly meeting that NETPA hosts. We're here in July. Really excited about today's guest speaker. But before we jump into that, I just want to share a few things about who NETPA is, who I am, and then we'll get started. So my name is Ryan England. I'm the president of NETPA. I own a company called The Core Matters. And we focus on helping growing businesses fill their frontline positions by implementing our proven system called the CoreFit hiring system. One of the things that I'm really excited about, what NETPA does, is we connect our community partners with employers and job seekers. We want to give people a platform for connections, especially right now. It's more critical than ever. It's so much harder to connect since we're not meeting in person, which is why we've started doing these monthly meetings to bring people together, give us a place where we can educate, where we can inform, where we connect employers and job seekers, so we can help employers fill their open positions, but more importantly, we can help job seekers find gainful employment. So our mission is to be a vast resource of education, training, and networking to both employers and community agencies. And our vision has shifted a little bit recently, but it's still about collaboration in the community. One of the things that we've identified is that there are a lot of people out there that struggle to find gainful employment because they have some sort of barrier to that employment, whether it's a disability, whether it's English as a second language. There are a lot of reasons that job seekers struggle to find gainful employment right now. And we want to be a catalyst for helping these job seekers find that great employment by connecting them with employers that want to fill their open positions with people just like them. So that leads me to today's speakers, I apologize. So our speakers today are Kevin McCloskey. He's the Director of Partnership Development for Disability Solutions, and Keith Meadows. And one of the things that we were talking about when I invited them in for this presentation is, why is it that employers seem scared to really put together a disability inclusion initiative? There's a fear associated with it. There's a stigma associated with it. And what I want them to do today is to break that down and to help employers understand that there are resources out there, there is support out there that can make this an easy transition. So Keith, Kevin, I want to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, sir. Let me share my screen here. How we all doing today? Thanks for having us. All right, so again, welcome to today's presentation. It's Dispelling Fear and Stigma training provided by Disability Solution in partnership with NETPA. A few housekeeping things before. I think Ryan touched on them, but all participants are on mute during the presentation. We definitely want to have, that end of the presentation, have a Q&A session, kind of open discussion. No question's a bad question. And we'll also provide you all with our contact information if you want to contact us directly after that. So as Ryan introduced us, I appreciate that. Somehow you got the Keith Meadows in the suit picture. I need to find that one. I got him without the suit jacket. I like that. So again, my name is Kevin McCloskey, the Director of Partnership Development with Disability Solutions. On your right-hand side is my wonderful colleague and friend, Keith Meadows, the Hiring Engagement Consultant. We have different titles, but we do the same things here at Disability Solutions. We basically manage our employer clients' efforts in attracting and hiring talent with disabilities by developing and managing federal, state, and local talent partners all across the country. We also work closely with employers to really educate them on the benefits of hiring talent with disabilities. We also provide them some really good tools to help best engage, support current and potential employees as well. I've been working directly with Pepsi and their Pepsi Act initiative for over 7 years now. Keith joined our team about 5 years ago, and he works with our employer clients, Bank of America, Synchrony, and helps with some work on Pepsi as well. So a little bit about Disability Solutions. As you can see from our logo in the bottom right, we are Disability Solutions at Ability Beyond. That is our parent company. It's a nonprofit based out of Connecticut and New York, and has provided services to individuals with all types of disabilities for over 60 years now. We created Disability Solutions. It's really a consulting arm of Ability Beyond, created about 8 years ago. And it was really, we really focused on, we saw a huge need where employers were struggling, as Ryan kind of said, is that fear of the really unknown of how to go out there and attract and hire and manage people with disabilities. So we really created Disability Solutions to help employers implement successful initiatives to attract, hire, and retain talent with all types of disabilities, including veterans with disabilities. We have about 22 clients across the country, including Pepsi, CenterPoint Energy, locally in Phoenix. I'll talk about those in a few. But our motto here at Disability Solutions is changing minds and changing lives. So we start with changing the minds of employers and really people in general, through education such as this, success stories that we've seen, and proven methods, which then results of changing lives of those job seekers with disabilities, finding meaningful employment with the clients that we work with. One of our really great features and solutions is our Disability Solutions Career Center, where we match job seekers with disabilities to employers looking to hire and really diversify their workforce. It's a free account for job seekers and community-based organizations. All of our employers don't just post their jobs, but we actually scrape their career centers daily throughout the day. So these are live jobs. These aren't just posted in kind of stale jobs. They are live jobs currently looking, and these employers currently looking for jobs. So if you are a community-based organization or a job seeker, anyone looking, have them fill out a free account. You can get daily alerts, and it's also has linked to our webinars and resources. They're all free to the job seeker in the community-based organization. So Disability Solutions has been embedded in Arizona since mid-2016. I think we have Tim Stump on the call today, one of my great partners, and I'll call him a friend as well. So 2016, we launched the Pepsi Act and Disability Hiring Initiative in the Phoenix location. Since then, we've launched another company, Synchrony, as well as some others on your screen. We had the luxury of working with many great partners, as I said, including NETPA board member Maggie throughout these years. So if you're a community-based organization serving job seekers with disabilities and you don't receive any of my alerts, please reach out to me and we could get you connected there. All right, so let's get to the meat of the presentation. Again, dispelling fear and stigma around people with disabilities. What are you going to learn today? We hope to get a greater understanding of the disability community in general, the strength of this untapped talent resource, and really the awareness of the wide array of disabilities out there and their abilities. We'll also do an overview of some actual outcomes, business solutions, and best practices through some case studies. It's also an opportunity to discuss perceptions and ask questions about fear and stigma and misperceptions, more importantly, around people with disabilities. Hoping you gain an understanding of the importance of culture and how talent with disabilities fit within that culture in your workplace. And we're hoping today you leave with a clear understanding of why hiring individuals with disabilities is really smart business, and we want to increase your level of comfort really on how to engage, lead, and mentor individuals with disabilities in the workplace. So we start with, what is a disability? And I'll throw it over to Keith to run you through it. Keith?
Thank you, Kevin. A great place to start. Just what is the definition of the word disability? If you ask people at your business or people you work with to define that word, what would they say, and what would you say? The actual definition is very broad. Most of us tend to think only of those with visible physical disabilities at first, or let's say a person in a wheelchair, when in fact 70% of all disabilities are hidden. We got conditions such as ADD, ADHD, PTSD, diabetes, anxiety. Those are all considered disabilities, although most people don't think they are. We're going to walk you through a couple of slides touching on the word disability from different sources, just to show you how nuanced that definition can actually be. First on your screen here is the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, definition of a disability. It defines it as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And the key phrase we want you to keep in mind there is physical or mental impairment. Next is another slide that kind of touches on some of those hidden disabilities that we just talked about. Certainly disability does include those you can see, but we want to expand your thinking beyond that visible disability paradigm that most people get stuck in when they think of disability. And just to highlight a few people that you may recognize who have battled hidden disabilities. First on your screen is Tom Cruise, who actually has overcame dyslexia, a learning disability. Next is Julia Louis-Dreyfus of Seinfeld and Veep fame, who is a cancer survivor. Next, probably one of the most recognizable faces in the world, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who recently has spoken about his struggles with depression and has become a mental health advocate. And our last photo today is a photo of me from a JCPenney studio. I have virtually nothing in common with these people, but what we do share is that we have hidden disabilities. I've struggled with severe asthma my whole life, and if you met me, you probably wouldn't be able to tell this unless you started challenging me to sprints or began chasing me for some reason. And these are kind of forgotten disabilities, those that you can't see. I'm going to throw it back to Kevin. He's going to help you out with the right terminology to use when we talk about the word disability.
All right. Again, we change minds and change lives. So as we continue to educate employers, we do start with one of the simple yet important pieces on how to address a person with a disability. This knowledge is something you can really take on right now, and you can make a ripple effect of difference in the world. And as we'll hear throughout this presentation, we here at Disability Solutions really prefer to use person-first language. Don't be worried if you still say some of these terms. It does time to break those old habits, and everyone's a little different on what they think is acceptable. But some of these are definitely not acceptable. So we often hear the disabled, the handicapped. We still unfortunately hear the cringeworthy R word, differently abled, special people, challenged people, crippled people. All these words we believe have a bit of a negative label associated with them. And when it comes to employment, and when you say there's a disabled car on the side of the highway, it really means that car doesn't work or it's not functioning properly. It's calling disabled as far as employment is kind of saying the same thing. And again, everyone's a little bit different. But we choose putting the person first or really keeping the disability off altogether. We certainly don't want an individual defined only by their disabilities. Again, companies are taking notice too. On the left-hand side, you'll see Keith and I got the opportunity to travel to a conference last summer, and you see this beautiful pamphlet that was titled Guide for Guests with Disabilities, much better than Disabled People Guide or something like that. It just has a better ring to it. Also, in 2019, Major League Baseball, they actually changed the disabled list to the injured list. And the league made the change out of concern that the term disabled for injured players falsely compares disabilities with injuries, and also that inability to participate in sports. Again, really a small educational piece to get employers and people not only thinking differently, but talking differently as well. Again, a small educational piece and impact and change you can make today. All right, so I'm also going to touch on a few common, typical myths and stigmas around people with disabilities. Some of these examples on the left-hand side, they may seem like thoughts of the past, but in 2020, we still hear some of these fears and stigmas, especially when talking to potential employers and also outside the workplace. Again, our main job is to debunk some of these thoughts and concerns with you as well through education and results we're seeing with our clients. We often hear almost daily from potential employer clients that people with disabilities can't do our jobs. We also hear we don't hire people with disabilities. We honestly hear it. And I can guarantee you whatever open positions you have right now, the right person with a disability can do each and every one of them, the right person. So from the mailroom to the boardroom, Disability Solutions has assisted our clients in hiring warehouse workers to department managers, to engineers, all the way to scientists, all with disabilities. Again, we're looking for the right talent for the right job. So Stephen Hawking on your right, probably not your ideal candidate for a delivery driver, but ended up being a really great fit for a few other fields. We want you to remember, not every person with a disability is that prototypical person in a wheelchair or someone with autism. I want you to know also people with mental health illnesses aren't dangerous, as we're told by the news in Hollywood every day. These and the ones on your screen help perpetuate awful stereotypes about people with disabilities. And we really want to challenge you to change your thinking. You do have the power to break them as people. So let's take a quick look at the opportunity within employment of people with disabilities. As of 2018, roughly 1 in every 4 Americans have some type of disability, which makes them the largest talent group in the United States. Not only people with disabilities are the largest talent group, they are an untapped pool of talent. As we all know now, the unemployment rate, it fluctuates from time to time, and a little shaky right now. But there is one number that really does stay consistent, and that's the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities is roughly double the unemployment rate of those without disabilities. And why is that? A few factors include those common fears and stigmas that we just talked about from employers that they still have around people with disabilities. Job seekers with disabilities are often pigeonholed into the same entry-level positions or temporary roles. They also face other barriers to employment, such as lack of transportation if they need it. Disability Solutions works with these employers to squash these fears and stigmas, and again, look at the talent over the disability. Remember what we all just heard about the different types of disabilities out there? You can definitely understand that this is a diverse talent that comes with this specific population. The talent ranges from transitioning high school students who haven't picked up any of those unhealthy work habits yet, to baby boomers with years of experience and degrees that possibly aged into a disability, and everyone in between. Our clients have definitely seen the benefits. Our clients focusing on hiring individuals with disabilities have seen a higher retention rate. For some reason, it's about 14% higher retention rate than other clients since their average retention of people without disabilities. We work with our clients to hire individuals with disabilities, again, from the mailroom to the boardroom. As I mentioned before, we got warehouse workers, we're talking about call centers, skilled technicians, department managers, engineers, all the scientists I talked about before. And also, if you're familiar with OFCCP and their audits, the government agency, our clients have seen a huge increase of self-disclosures, not just on applications, but also on hires as well. Let's talk a little bit about diversity within disabilities. It's known that diverse hiring increases productivity, creativity, and also the employer's internal and external brand and reputation. Employers are always looking for innovative ways to attract and hire from other diverse populations. Well, I got some news for you. There is a wonderful diversity within disability. We like to say disabilities don't discriminate, much like the veteran population. They hit on all diversity metrics, including African American, Hispanic, Asian, women, and veterans themselves. So therefore, when you're hiring people with disabilities, you're also going to increase all of your diversity outreach and hiring metrics across the board. All right, so the market value. We talked about the talent value. Let's talk about the market value. Again, 1 in 4 of Americans have some type of disability. So tapping into this talent pool, it's also going to increase your business and launch your company into a new market of customers. Taking a look at the numbers, you'll see that out of 70 million families, there are 20 million families that have at least one member of their family with a disability. That's a lot of potential customers. People with disabilities also account for a spending power over $645 billion. Studies show that 87% of the public prefer to spend their money on businesses that hire people with disabilities. Not sure what the other 13% prefer. Maybe they're just neutral. People with disabilities and family members of people with disabilities are really fiercely loyal with their purchasing dollars, and they definitely consciously select products and services over the competitors. You just ask my wife how I'm very conscious about the Pepsi products that I buy. My kids get Gatorade. They don't touch Powerade. They get Aquafina instead of Dakani. We support all Pepsi products because we have that shared belief. And I've been working with them for over 7-8 years now, and I see what the influence they have. So why not have those spending dollars go directly to your company? Again, this is going to companies who foster inclusion, and the disabilities community, as we discussed, is large, and they definitely are taking notice. Keith, back to you.
All right, we're going to get into a few different types of disabilities, but as we discussed, with the definition of the word disability, we learned that it was a pretty broad one. It covers many different types of disabilities. Certain disabilities are often generalized or stereotyped, but the key takeaway is that all are unique individuals with different skill sets, no matter what that disability is. A lot of people get nervous and, they ask, what's the right thing to say, or, how do I act around someone with a disability? Believe it or not, you've probably seen it. A lot of people are terrified. And the short answer is to act as you normally would, disability or not. Don't worry about feeling uncomfortable or making mistakes when your intentions are good. It's okay to use the word "see you later" to someone who's blind. Example we like to give is, former President George W. Bush, waved at Stevie Wonder when he was walking towards him during a presidential concert when he was in office. Obviously Stevie didn't see that, and, it's okay to make mistakes and be uncomfortable. But we want you to realize that for most people with disabilities, there are two things of utmost importance. They're really important to us all, but they're even more heightened for those with disabilities, and those are independence and acceptance. We want to live as independently as possible, and we also want to be accepted by society, friends, family members, coworkers, and strangers. So we're going to walk you through some different types of disabilities here, give you some tips on etiquette, some do's, some don'ts. One common thread through all of these is that there may be some fear on your part, either because of the disability or not knowing the right way to react. And just use these tips and also pretend you're talking to a family member or a friend, and that fear does go away. Kevin, back to you.
All right. Well, one thinks of disabilities, they often first think of those visible disabilities, when in fact, as we mentioned, only 30% of disabilities are actually visible or noticeable. Another common misperception is that someone in a wheelchair represents most of this population, so much that it acts as an example of a parking space, when in fact only 8% of people with disabilities utilize a wheelchair. So let's take a look at some of these visible physical disabilities. Tongue twister. Some common examples are someone who uses a wheelchair or arm braces for mobility. Also people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Deafness refers to that inability to understand speech through hearing, even when the sound is amplified. Profound deafness means the person cannot hear anything at all and unable to detect sound even at the highest volume possible. So it's different levels. Also, we got amputee congenital birth defects, such as football sensation Shaquem Griffin, who plays for the Seattle Seahawks. He was born with an amniotic band syndrome, which affected his left hand, causing his fingers not to fully develop. These are just a few that represent this category. So let's talk about etiquette when it comes to physical visible disabilities. So the first tip, if we want you to learn, is if that individual is using a device such as a wheelchair, crutches, or a walker, or anything really helping them with mobility, you don't want to touch that device. It really is a part of their person. So you touching someone's wheelchair without asking is pretty much the same if I walked up to Keith and grabbed him by his shirt and kind of walked him around. A quick story, personal story, is my father-in-law has MS and utilizes a wheelchair. So when I used to go visit him, 10 years ago, he is in a facilitated facility, assisted facility. I'd go visit him and we'd go up to his room and my kids would be downstairs and I'd say, hey, Bill, and I'd grab him by his chair, wheel him down the hallway, down the elevator, into the common area, and we'd have pizza. I never once thought to ask him if it was okay for me to touch his chair or if he wanted to go downstairs. So one day I decided to ask, hey, Bill, we're here to have pizza with you. Do you want to go down to the common area? And his response was no. He's like, I want to go to the cafeteria. I kind of want to show his family and his grandchildren off to the rest of his friends. So it's funny that I never even thought about what he wanted to do. It was just, I was there to have pizza with him. I want to take him down the lobby. That was my thought, not where he wanted to go. So it was just a simple asking to find out what he wanted to do. Another thing I always thought was interesting is, again, it's a part of who they are. So, at my desk, at my work desk, I have, now Las Vegas Raider memorabilia, because that's what represents me. That's what I like, pictures of my family. So you'll see wheelchairs that are decorated with the liking of who is in that wheelchair. And kind of going back to etiquette, my father-in-law would have lots of stuff on his wheelchair and I'd be like, oh, what's this from? He's like, I don't know. So I just put it there. So the staff was like putting stuff on his wheelchair just to decorate, because that they thought, it'd be cool to decorate his wheelchair, but they didn't represent him. So there's a quick kind of a personal story on the importance of the wheelchair and those individuals that are utilizing them. Also, when you're talking to a person in a wheelchair, a really sign of, a nice gesture is get down to their eye level. This positioning definitely shows respect to the individual. It doesn't make them uncomfortable by looking up you for a long duration of time. I definitely challenge you to kind of tilt your neck up for about 30 seconds and tell me how it feels. So it's a nice level. It's nice to get down to the level of them, especially if you're going to be talking to them more than 30 seconds or a minute. Pull up a chair, take a knee, whatever is good for you. As with all disabilities, you should definitely ask if they need help versus assuming that they need help. Again, our society has really conditioned us that People with disabilities need help and charity. Therefore, sometimes we assume that this person in a wheelchair might need, help crossing the street or opening the door. Again, people with disabilities have been through a lot, and they're definitely very proud people. So that person in a wheelchair may have spent years getting to the point where he or she can cross the road. And really, when you come up and assuming that they are helpless, kind of cheapens their progress. That's why if you notice someone who may possibly need help, simple rule is just, ask them. Give them the opportunity to accept that help or decline that help. Also, if you're working a business or you're doing any interviewing or anything like that, make sure your environment is accessible for those with physical disabilities. Make sure your wheelchair ramps are open and functioning. Again, Keith and I we used to travel around the country a lot. And it was funny, you'd see great ramps and nice accessible ramps, but you'd see storage boxes at the top. So they really weren't accessible. We've seen it we've seen it a lot. Make sure your automatic doors and elevators are working properly. Again, if you do interview, make sure your interview area is clear for those individuals using those devices. Keep this thought in your mind before the interviewee arrives, or any guest really, and that will eliminate any of those uncomfortable moments of moving everything around to be able to make it accessible. Most buildings these days are built with this in mind. However, lots of them, the older ones, really aren't accessible right away. Keith, back to you.
All right. At this point in the presentation, if Kevin and I are delivering this in a live setting, we like to just ask for a show of hands of, how many people have ever met someone who is completely blind, or how many people have ever met someone who's completely deaf. And let's say that, there's maybe 30 people in the group, we might get 1 or 2 hands. I suspect we'd probably get a few more hands on this training, but that right there kind of is the fear and the anxiety. The general public just doesn't have a lot of experience interacting with people with disabilities, and a lot of us are afraid to say the wrong thing to someone with a disability. For instance, if a person is blind, should you use words such as look, see, or watch? The answer is yes, if that's a part of your normal vocabulary, and as long as your normal vocabulary isn't offensive. The person who's blind can usually sense that you're editing your words or changing how you talk to address them, which is going to put them on the defensive. For instance, you may want to say to a blind coworker, did you see the game last night? And right in the middle of delivering that sentence, you kind of catch yourself, so it becomes, did you see, and your face gets red and you start getting sweaty. And, that just makes that person feel awkward and sends the signal that you don't feel comfortable with them, and you've got to watch your words around them, even though you're just trying to be respectful. This also leads to significant barriers being put up, communication barriers being put up, because the person with a disability knows you aren't comfortable talking to them. For all you dog lovers out there, I include myself in this group. I've got 2 Australian Shepherds that keep me up at all hours of the day, but I know this is hard, but you cannot pet or distract guide dogs. The obvious reason is that the person with the disability relies on this dog heavily, so distracting that animal can potentially lead that person into some dangerous situations. Kids and people like me sometimes don't understand this and want to love the animal, so just make sure that you let them know that the dog is working and doing a really important job. Also, a common theme is that once people see or notice that someone has any kind of disability, they tend to talk slower and louder, kind of like that. Just because someone is blind doesn't mean that they have a cognitive impairment that would require you to speak like that. Is that possible? For a person to be blind and also have a cognitive impairment? Absolutely, but assuming that you need to talk slowly and loudly for all people with disabilities is just disrespectful. But you'd be amazed how many people think you need to talk to all people with disabilities like that. Treat us just like you would any other person and adjust your communication style as needed, and just don't go in with those loaded assumptions. All right. Deaf and hard of hearing, let's start with the proper terminology to use, and we'll throw in some statistics as well. Deaf and hard of hearing are the preferred terms by the community. You might have heard of hearing impaired. That's common, but it is not a preferred term by the community. About 15% of adults over the age of 18, so we're talking some 38 million people, report some sort of hearing loss. Now, that shoe doesn't fit every person or situation. People have varying degrees of hearing loss, and not everyone's going to require the same communication method. The number one tip here is to react to the individual normally and adjust. And when in doubt, ask the individual. That person may be able to hear everything you say, and you may just need to speak a bit louder. They may be able to read your lips as you speak, or they may use a sign language interpreter, or they may prefer written communication. Most hard of hearing individuals will let you know this in advance or pretty much right away since they live it every day. However, when in doubt, simply ask. Another really important tip here is if you're interacting with an individual who is deaf and who is using a sign language interpreter, is to make sure and maintain eye contact with the individual who is deaf and not the interpreter. And this really goes against everything that we have been programmed to do. You're supposed to maintain eye contact with whoever's talking to you, but the interpreter is going to be the one talking, but it's going to be the words of the individual who is deaf. So you'll want to make sure and maintain eye contact with that person. It's a great sign of respect that you can communicate. All right, developmental disabilities are a group of conditions. They result in impairment in physical, learning, language, or behavior areas. These conditions impact day-to-day functioning, and they usually last throughout a person's lifetime. There are roughly 6 million Americans that have a developmental disability. A few examples of developmental disabilities on your screen here, one of which includes Down syndrome. To the right, you can see actress Jamie Brewer, whose talent has landed her multiple TV and movie roles. She has Down syndrome, just another example of how people with disabilities can achieve the highest levels of a career, just like anyone else. Another example of a developmental disability is cerebral palsy, also known as CP. It affects normal movement in different parts of the body and has different degrees of severity. And about 2/3 of individuals with CP can walk, and some use mobility devices as well. The etiquette piece of this is, a great rule of thumb here is to speak and interact normally and then react to the individual. So if a person has an intellectual disability or a developmental disability that's noticeable, maybe Down syndrome, many times, people are going to react automatically by talking slowly or loudly and just assuming that that's what's needed. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But assuming that for every person up front is just a way that you're going to potentially insult every single person you interact with. So we encourage you to adapt your conversation to the individual. You're just going to start talking normally, just like you would anyone else, and you're going to pick up on vocal cues, you're going to pick up on body language, and you're going to adjust. If talking slower and louder is needed, then you can do so. Also, don't assume that they're not capable. We see this a lot of times with job interviews. People with disabilities, especially noticeable ones, often get counted out before they even get a chance to begin the interview and talk about their skill set. We'd like to think this doesn't happen in 2020, but to be very real with you, it happens every single day. Books get judged by the cover, and just make it a point to give everyone a fair shot and not make those assumptions. Also in interviews, we see this, a person with a cognitive disability, sometimes depending on that disability, a job seeker is going to be a bit slower to answer interview questions, maybe a couple second delay or so. And oftentimes that interviewer, thinking that, the question hasn't been heard or hasn't been understood, they'll repeat that question, sometimes pretty impatiently. And for someone with this type of disability, that can really throw off their thinking and send that interview into a downward spiral for both sides. Finally, treat each person's age appropriately. This one boils down to be yourself and talk normally until you need to adapt. Coming up to a 50-year-old man or woman and talking to them as if they were a 4-year-old child, I can assure you will not get you in their good graces. Kevin, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Keith. All right. So autism spectrum disorder, otherwise known as ASD, is a developmental disability that can cause significant social, communication, and behavioral challenges. There's often nothing about how people with ASD look that sets them apart from other people, but people with ASD, they may communicate, interact, behave, and learn in ways that are different from most other people. The learning, thinking, and problem-solving abilities of people with ASD can range from gifted to severely challenged. Some people with ASD need a lot of help in their daily lives, while others need less, and some actually, oh, I'm on the wrong slide, aren't I? I'm sorry. My apologies. There you go. All right. So, autism spectrum disorders, ASD, Some behavioral things you might see as atypical behavior: hand flapping, rocking, trying to ignore, don't stare. One thing Keith kind of mentioned this before is they can hear you speak about them. It's just because they have these actions doesn't mean they're cognitive, not understanding what you're saying to them. I used to work with some good teenagers who had autism, actually Asperger's, and people would come up to me and talk about them right in front of me. I was like, they can hear you, you can talk to them. So it's another kind of etiquette thing I want you to know about. That atypical behavior, hand flapping and rocking, sometimes is more of a coping mechanism than anything. So you don't want to touch without warning, and just it is pretty common. Also, communication difficulties are very common. Limited eye contact. When we coach individuals on the spectrum for job interviews, we like to help them look at the eyebrows or the forehead, so it looks like you're making eye contact, to kind of coach them on those kind of quote unquote normal behaviors that employers are really looking for. Unexpected blunt statements or comments are very common. They're very factual. Individuals, again, working with the teenagers, I was told every day that my arms were hairy, which is definitely a fact, but something I don't like to be reminded of constantly. So that comes up. And they say every case of autism is different, which is definitely true. Again, it is a spectrum. It's under a spectrum for a reason. As I just said, it could be, very intelligent. You wouldn't even realize it, to someone who has lots of behaviors, and it could be non-communicative as well. But I like to say, I think every person has a little difference in them, and every disability as well. It's something we really preach to employers that we work with is, again, it's not, sometimes employers will be like, oh yeah, what kind of disability would be good for this job? And when we're like, that the right person would be good for that job, not just any disability, because everyone's got different skills, different needs, different wants, so on and so forth. So good thing to keep in mind. Keith, back to you.
Thank you. So hidden disabilities, mental disorders. This is really the only disability, if you think about it, where we blame the person. Just imagine, somebody with depression. How many times have we heard, oh, just, suck it up, cheer up? Or maybe somebody with, anxiety. Hey, calm down. Geez, just calm down. We're essentially blaming the person. Can you imagine saying something, you're walking down the street with someone with cerebral palsy who uses a walker, and you're saying, geez, come on, speed up, go faster. I mean, that's just cringeworthy, but yet we do that to people with mental disorders. So we encourage you to kind of change your thought process there. We touched on the fact that hidden disabilities represent 70% of all disabilities. That means you're going to have absolutely no idea that a person has a disability. They could be your best friend, coworker, or somebody you pass on the street. We've went through a few examples of those hidden disabilities, some of which you can see on your screen there. They include major depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. You see the photo on your right there, Kevin Love, who plays for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's came out very publicly about his struggles with anxiety and depression, and has become a really big mental health advocate. And we're seeing a lot of folks in the public sphere opening up to that and embracing that role, which is really cool to see. As far as etiquette, for those with mental disorders, we mentioned that they're in the hidden disability category, and that means that you're going to cross paths in your daily life with many people who have a hidden mental disability. One thing, we encourage you not to say is, you've probably heard the expression, geez, did you take your meds today? In some fashion or other. We've heard it in workplace, in the restaurant, in our house, on the street, and it's really become kind of another way of just saying, hey, calm down. But what we don't realize is that's one of the worst things you could possibly say to a person with a mental disorder. It kind of seems like a casual, joking around comment, but it can really put a person with a mental disability on edge and make them uncomfortable, especially if that mental illness is hidden and undisclosed. If it's in the workplace, I can assure you that person with the disability is asking themselves, how do they know that I take meds? Do they know about my diagnosis? Are they going to tell others? Does everybody in the office know that I have a disability now? And it can really affect them on a personal and professional level. So I would challenge you to completely delete that phrase from your vocabulary. There's probably 500 other ways that you can express those same sentiments. So encourage you to choose one of those paths. Also, the golden rule works here as it does everywhere else. Treat everyone the same as you would like to be treated, regardless of whether they have a disability or not. I'll throw it back to Kevin for his favorite slide.
Thanks, Keith. Before we get into that, I want to also kind of address the be supportive, include but don't insist as well. People with mental disorders might not be comfortable going out to happy hours after work or being involved in some of those company activities. So you definitely want to be supportive, include them in those activities, send the invite, but you don't want to keep on pushing if they're giving resistance, because some of those can increase the symptoms of those mental disorders, and you don't want to put them in an awkward place. So include, but don't insist. All right, this is my favorite slide because I am a huge fan of Tom Cruise. And this is hidden disabilities, learning disabilities. So learning disabilities are neurologically based processing problems. These processing problems can interfere with learning basic skills such as reading, writing, and or math. They can also interfere with higher levels of skills such as organization, abstract reasoning, time planning, as well as long and short-term memory. Learning disabilities do not go away, as I really thought as a younger adult. Basically, the brain just works differently as an adult, and these individuals learn many new skills and ways of getting around those difficulties. Adults with learning disabilities who find careers where they can use their strengths and get around those difficulties can be very successful. Again, Tom Cruise, he has a learning disability, which is dyslexia. So Cruise trained himself to focus his attention. He became a very visual learner, and he learned how to create mental images in order to comprehend what he read. Again, he is an actor, right? So he needs to read the scripts and approve them and act in them and do his lines. So as a young actor, he would go into casting calls and they'd give him a cold read, right? So you're handed a script and you got to do the scene right there. So what Tom would do was he'd ask the casting director a lot of questions. What's the relationship with the character? What happened in the scene before? What's going to happen after? Basically asking all these questions to get a lot of intel on the scene itself. And he was able to ad-lib, using the lines, but also ad-lib some of those lines, and actually that really impressed the casting director. To this day, he still has scripts read aloud to him. He has an assistant that helps him. He does a lot of rewriting of the scripts and movies that he's in. So he still battles with it today, but again, finds ways to get around that learning disability to be very successful. It doesn't let him get in his way. Keith, you want to take this one, or is this me?
Yeah, I can take it. Yeah, thank you. So hidden disabilities, medical disabilities, they're usually acquired during your lifetime, and they're not something that you're born with. And contrary to what most people think, you can acquire a disability in life, even if you didn't have one before. A few common examples are traumatic brain injuries, also known as TBIs, strokes, and a few that may surprise people are diabetes or cancer survivors. Two-time Oscar winner Tom Hanks in 2013 came out and talked about his diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. This hidden medical disability group is a group that you can actually join at any time. So statistically speaking, it's a bit of a morbid statistic, but you're more likely to acquire some type of disability by the age of 65 than you are to pass away by that age. Kevin, back to you.
Love how you drop that stat and then pass it back to me. All right, so let's talk. We learned a little bit about disabilities and kind of that what different types and the etiquette. Really preparing you for understanding the reason why it's smart and a good reason to actually go out there and attract and hire and work with people with some disabilities, and hope we give you a few tools for your toolkit here. But we want to talk about some results, right? So we do this stuff, we practice it, we preach it, but we want to show you that there is proof in the pudding with a few case studies here. I'm going to start with Pepsi. So Pepsi, we linked up with Pepsi roughly about 7-8 years ago, and then launched officially in 2014. And we called it Pepsi Acts Achieving Change Together. It's a partnership between Disability Solutions and Pepsi. Over the last 5 years, we've hired 1,800 individuals with disabilities into their organization. We launched in 9 sites, which helped us launch 9 sites in 4 years, with actually helped us go expansion to all sites early last year. On the top right, you can see we got a visit from the former Secretary of Labor. That's down in the Winston-Salem call center. He's actually pictured there with Tammy, who was our first hire. Again, individual with a disability, which you wouldn't be telling because she has a hidden disability, right? From there, we were able to hire, again, warehouse workers, merchandisers, sales representatives, department managers, again, the call center sales, call center tech support. We worked in distribution centers, we worked in call centers, we worked in a technical facility out in Las Vegas. And we were able to hire, again, 1,800 individuals with disabilities that selected they have a disability. I'm sure there's a lot more. You can see in the bottom right, individual who has Asperger's. And on the bottom left is a veteran with a disability who has PTSD and other physical disability that you wouldn't be able to realize as well. This program has been recognized by the Department of Labor and the OFCCP. They actually just won a few months ago the Gold Award, the first ever Gold Award from the Department of Labor in disability inclusion. So again, great respect of what they've done over the last 7 years or so. And I'm going to play a wonderful video. So this is the video that they released in 2019, last year, as part of their National Disability Employment Awareness Month campaign. And it was really to really highlight the individual disabilities working within Pepsi, all across their brand. So not just Pepsi beverages, who we work with. This is Frito-Lay, Gatorade, Tropicana, all across the board. It highlights some of the disabilities that employees with disabilities within PepsiCo. And also it was a kind of call to action to them go ahead and, support any people with disabilities within their company and support their campaign to self-ID so they understand who's working for them. So I'm going to play this video real quick. Enjoy.
Been with PepsiCo for coming up on 5 years now. Work on the fountain line, do everything from side graphics, new valves, new lines, hoses, make it the beautiful machines that you guys see when you go have dinner at night with your family.
I'm an administrator, and I make sure the building runs, pay all the bills and everything like that. I've been here 22 years. I'm on the downward fall now. I'm going towards the 40 years.
I've been with Frito-Lay for about 13 years. I'm a pre-pick picker, and I basically work on the module. You have to be quick. You have so many bags you need to pick. You have lots of orders, and you need to make sure you get them all.
A normal day for me is I go out there on the floor, see how my guys are doing, see how everything's going, and make sure my guys have their work orders and they know what they're doing for the day.
I am an HR specialist, and so what I do is I design surveys to really get at what our business leaders want to know about our employees and how they're feeling.
I've been with PepsiCo almost 9 years, and I am currently in supply chain finance, supporting the warehouse function.
I'm the senior market director in the state of Indiana. I've been with the company for 34 years.
I have a disability called achromatopsia. I'm considered blind. I'm really susceptible to light. I can't see very well in light either. So, yes, it is, but it's fine. I can't even see your face.
Sensitive, unusual, hearing loss.
I have multiple sclerosis.
Traumatic brain injury.
I'm a type 1 diabetic.
Our son has Angelman syndrome.
I'm a mother of a child with dyslexia. What they're looking at may not be what they think that they see, that there's something that goes on underneath all of our skins.
If you say hi to you, he likes you.
Some of the challenge is the unknown. The atypical days are the days when he has seizure episodes. It's a horrible situation for any family to deal with or person to deal with because it's really the edge of death.
I found out that I had my disability when I was 5. My mom sat me down. She said, I want to let you know that you have a disease.
Sorry. I don't know.
It's more of a neurological disease, like an extension cord plugs into the wall, which would be my brain. The cord might be frayed, and you won't get a great connection. My connection doesn't go towards my body.
I was about 6 or 7 years old when I came down with scarlet fever. I've lost approximately about 50% of my hearing. At this point, I'm down to maybe like 30% of my hearing.
I was in second grade and I started to cry during a math test because I could no longer see the numbers on the page. They were blurry. And that was because my blood sugar was so high that it began to put pressure on my optic nerves. And so it was messing with my vision. Sometimes having a disability, especially an invisible disability, you can sort of feel isolated and like no one knows what you're going through every day.
In 2002, I joined the military. And during one of my deployments while I was in the Army, I was injured, got hit in the head. My back is in all kinds of shambles, and I do have PTSD from that incident.
The support that we have received from PepsiCo is vast and comprehensive.
When I first applied for this role with PepsiCo, the first thing out of my mouth was, I said, are you sure that you want to put a territory in the hands of someone that cannot pick up a phone and put a fire out like that? And my boss says, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
They're going to help you. You need things printed bigger. You need things signed to, whatever it may be that you need, it's going to be there for you. And no one's going to hold it against you if you need a little bit of help.
Disabled employees and caregivers are welcome and are vital to our business and future growth. Self-identification is important so the company knows how well we're serving our associates with disabilities. 1 in 5 working-age Americans has a condition that qualifies as a disability. Disability reaches all ages, all races, and your gender doesn't matter. The term disability includes a vast array of conditions. 70% or more are hidden disabilities, meaning these conditions are not visible to others.
I would say absolutely self-identify. There's absolutely no reason for you not to. I acknowledge my disability as part of who I am.
A little bit of a weight was lifted the day that I did tell my manager for the first time. It was great to feel like she knew who I was as an employee.
Make sure that there's very open dialogue and transparency.
Let them know that, even though you do have a disability, you still can be productive and you can be part of the team and help get things done from day to day.
Associates with disabilities, like any of our associates, are integral members of our big PepsiCo family. We take pride that diversity is in our DNA. That's the PepsiCo way. And it's how each and every associate is treated.
I love my job.
I mean, I wouldn't want to work anywhere else. They don't treat me any different. They treat me as just Brian.
It's about bringing my full self to work.
It's huge to have a voice. You're the only you.
To all our associates with disabilities and anyone who is a caregiver or a person with a disability, I simply want to say this. You belong here at PepsiCo. You make us a faster, stronger, better company. So please take the time to self-identify through the MyHR system, and we will continue doing everything we can to support you and encourage more people with disabilities to join the PepsiCo team.
All right. Sorry about the mess up there. I was trying to answer a chat question. But now I'm going to throw it over to Keith to talk about the relationship we've had with Synchrony.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So we began our partnership with Synchrony in 2016. We began in Dayton, Ohio. We began at a call center there, and we're able to source talented individuals with disabilities for a variety of positions. And just to give you a bit of a background, if you're unfamiliar, Synchrony is a bank, but they're also the largest provider of private label credit cards in the United States. So they're behind the credit cards of companies like Amazon, Lowe's, BP, and JCPenney, just to name a few. And with all of our projects, we focus on competitive employment, or as we like to call it, win-win employment, meaning that everyone who applied would still need to meet the same job requirements and fulfill those same duties as everyone else. And you can see some of those results on our screen here. To date, we've hired over 650 folks with Synchrony, and these hires are individuals with a wide variety of disabilities and also a wide variety of roles too, from entry level all the way up to salaried roles. Folks who are completely blind or have visual impairments, employees who have recently acquired physical disabilities due to previous jobs, to employees who have struggled with mental health and have hidden disabilities that we touched on earlier, like anxiety, depression, diabetes, and PTSD. Most importantly, for employers out there, we've been able to beat the company average for retention. So with both of these case studies, you're seeing not only companies hiring people with disabilities because it's the right thing to do, they're doing it because it also makes great business sense, and they're able to impact their bottom line by not hiring as many folks, and they're also able to add diverse viewpoints, which any good company that's going to be a welcome addition as well. So we've got another short video for you just to show you how impactful it can be for companies to hire people with disabilities. We can talk about it all day, but it's important to get a visual sense too of the companies that are doing it the correct way. So I'll throw it back to Kevin. He'll cue up that video.
The biggest challenge I faced in the past when looking for employment was whether or not they were going to give me a fair shake.
I couldn't get interviews. I couldn't get in the door.
You just could almost see it on the employer's face when I come rolling in. They just all of a sudden, they've already decided she's not going to fit.
People don't tend to give you a chance to prove yourself.
It was so awesome to come here to Synchrony and find out that, they're overlooking that.
Synchrony is a great example of a company that, doesn't pay lip service to an idea.
First and foremost, Synchrony's commitment to ensuring we have a diverse and inclusive culture and body of employees that represent our marketplace. It's not only an altruistic pursuit. We do this because it's good business. A lot of the mistakes I thought we were going to make, we avoided because we were guided by experts. We hired Disability Solutions, and they were really able to shepherd us to engage in the community.
It's companies like Synchrony that provide us, the disability community, with the opportunity to showcase our talent and our values.
And Disability Solutions, they trained me into finding out how to apply myself at a job.
That made me feel like I wasn't alone. Made me feel like there's other people out there. It's not just me, not happening to just me.
Keith Meadows, he great coaching. Told me, helped me with the interview process, gave me confidence because he saw that I had an ability, not a disability.
It's a welcoming culture, and they feel that they're being evaluated based on their merits and their abilities, which is huge.
I have a learning disability, so I call it more of a learning ability because I think different than others. So I learn different in different ways. When somebody gives you just a little bit of confidence and even sees, doesn't look at negative parts, but looks at the positive, that's what gives you confidence.
Yeah, they're going to look at you and see, okay, he's in this chair. But if I portray confidence, then maybe not look at me in that manner.
It's been very inspiring, honestly. It's inspired me just seeing the work ethic and the drive, and the type of employees that we're recruiting through this program.
The next phase of our project, I think, will really shift to getting people hired to ensuring that we have an environment where people are growing and getting promoted.
My goal is to go up the ladder and show that I can, that you can be successful.
And even if I get out of this chair, which is my goal, that's my goal, is to get out of this chair. I would like to get out of this chair, but even at that, I think I still, would stay here.
I'm still working here, so I must be doing something right. So
I never would have thought that I would be in a position that I am now. I never even thought that I would be able to make a paycheck again.
So if you're struggling and you get the same, deer in the headlight look every time that you go into an employer, being deaf, blind, wheelchair, or some other sort of disability, here's your chance.
The main thing is never give up on yourself. Whatever job or employment that you want to go for, believe that you can get it. That's the first step.
No matter if you have a disability or not, you still have hope. And you can still accomplish whatever you set your mind to.
All right. A nice little video. We play those. Well, Keith gives me $20 every time I play that video for him. But we don't play those videos to kind of pat ourselves on the back. We really want to show you both sides of, actually 3 sides. There's really the point of view of the job seekers with disabilities that you're seeing, the employees once they're employed, and you know, a nice job and a good competitive job that they're, you know, able to provide for themselves and their families, and also the employers that are taking notice and really learning as they go and doing it the right way. So I like to focus that on. I think those videos both touch on all those sides, which I think is really nice to show. So we have 2 more slides here, then we'll jump into the Q&A session. So when we start working with employers, once they get over the fact that they don't hire people with disabilities or people with disabilities can't do their jobs, the next thing they're kind of scared about is accommodations. And we teach employers really that, you know, disabilities does not equal accommodations. Just because they have a disability doesn't mean they're going to need accommodations. Again, we've hired probably, I think we've done up to 2,500 individuals we've helped hire into our employer clients. And I can count on both hands how many accommodations we needed to make those individuals successful on those jobs. And everyone forgets, most HR teams or the lawyers always forget about reasonable accommodations. So the key word is reasonable. Most of these reasonable accommodations are under $500. Most have no cost whatsoever. A couple of those no-cost examples are, you know, a veteran who has PTSD who needs to see all the exits at a time, right? So they just, you know, simply moving their desk so they could see the exit. That is an accommodation. Oftentimes we work with people who are blind or visually impaired who use a really, really great computer program called JAWS, which basically reads everything out loud to the individual. And again, we also, if our companies are you know, scared of accommodations, we also lean on support from those community-based organizations that support these individuals, and they can help them sometimes with those accommodations and those supports. There are also some experts in accessibility as well. And we preach not to be intimidated by the word accommodation. Again, most accommodations can be worked out easily and are very low cost. We also preach to have a nice accommodation process, whether it's the application or someone who gets onto a job and needs an accommodation and acquires a disability along the way and needs an accommodation, to have that process easily accessible, and to work with both the job seeker and the employer together as a combination to figure out what's the best accommodation for the individual to be successful. So leaning on both parties. Again, and the whole accommodation process, we do discovery work with employers, and we see on the application process, there's an email or a phone number, and that phone number has a full mailbox, so that individual's not able to get that accommodation, or that email goes to someone so high level that it's never addressed. We've seen it all the time, unfortunately. So again, we want to make sure that our employers are picking the best person for the job, and that person may happen to have a disability. Another thing we preach is really natural supports. Again, everyone's scared of accommodations, but we want to make sure you're inclusive and welcoming environment. Inclusion does work, right? You know, study after study can probably show you that. And when you're hiring for, you know, diverse workforces, typically disabilities are kind of usually forgotten. So we want to make sure that disabilities is a key piece of that puzzle, whether you're recruiting or hiring or retaining, you know, all your talent. Natural sports, again, critical to the companies that we work with, for those with disabilities or not. Some of these examples on the screen are good, right? A great example of a natural sport is like a mentorship program. We see this a lot with veterans. If veterans are hired through a company, they're usually mentored and teamed up with a current employee who's a veteran. Same thing with someone with disability or a manager that could be helpful. We've all been that new employee on the job before, and these you know, easy way to, you know, check in, see how the training's going. Have any questions? You know, some of those questions aren't covered in trainings, like, you know, where's the bathroom, or when can we take a bathroom break? There's some things that are just never really addressed in that training. So those check-ins and mentors in natural sports are really helpful. We also support ERGs, starting a disability employment resource group. Again, we've seen employers who are investing their time and support in their employees tend to keep that talent in the door and help those employers grow. A personal story I have is, you know, we work with Pepsi in Minnesota, where we had an individual who was fresh out of high school, had a learning disability, and struggled early on to hit his metrics as a warehouse loader. He actually had an accident with his forklift and everything, but they saw the talent within him. They saw he kept on improving, and they just gave him a little extra training. So instead of the 90 days, they gave him 120 days, and he was able to get where he needed to be, and is still there today, probably about 3 or 4 years now. So again, giving him a little extra support, disability or no disability, is tend to see results. So that training, extra support is really good. So that's why we push natural supports. So with that said, I'm going to do a quick review. Again, 1 in 4 Americans have some type of disability. Disability limits one or more of life's major activities. It's very broad, mental and physical. There are many different types of disabilities. We hope you learned some today. Cancer survivor, diabetes are some of those who are typically forgotten, and think of medical conditions, not disabilities. And etiquette, when it comes to etiquette, we just really preach the golden rule. Treat others how you like to be treated, and make sure you ask rather than assuming that individual disabilities need some help. So that said, Ryan, I'll turn it back to you, or I can just jump into Q&A, whatever you prefer.
Why don't you just go ahead and jump right in?
All right, perfect. So I do have a couple questions here. All right, so we had a couple questions prior to this training. First one is, I had a job, I'm going to go with this one first. When is the best time to disclose a disability to a potential employer? At the time of interview or after being hired? Keith, I'll throw that one to you.
Thank you, Kevin. So it really kind of depends. So let's say if you're looking at that job description, you'll want to analyze it and make sure that you can meet all of those essential functions, that you meet those qualifications. And if you do, you don't need to disclose that disability. And on the flip side, let's say you're hired. You met all those qualifications, and you've started, and you've noticed that your disability is kind of impacting your performance, and you've got a few ideas that could get you to the next level. So at that point, you'd want to disclose your disability to get a reasonable accommodation or begin that discussion. So we'd like to say that, self-identification is kind of a personal choice. So if you've ever applied to a job and you've seen that, do you have a disability? Check yes, no, or I do not wish to answer. That's entirely up to you, and that's not filtered on to the staff or the hiring managers, and it will be attached to your application, and it's like, oh, this person has a disability. That's more for compliance purposes for the company, to make sure that they're hiring people with disabilities. And so you want to request an accommodation or disclose your disability if you need an accommodation. So let's say you're applying for the position and you know that you're going to need an accommodation for the interview. At that point, it would make sense to disclose. And then also, once you're on the job, if you identify something relating to your disability that could help get you to that level.
Thank you, Keith. All right, another question is, I had a job seeker that interviewed with her walker for a position that involved going into clients' homes. Some apartments, she had a really hard time, and then a hard time getting her manager to give her different clients. When she was interviewed, she understood the nature of the job, imply that she could do the job. In this instance, does she qualify for an accommodation? So I will state before this, I'm not a lawyer, and we don't want to get in trouble. So, a lot of accommodation requests and information is always gray, right? There's no black and white answer to it. And you got to look at the job, you got to look at that individual, their disability, and the job itself. So can that job be done with a reasonable accommodation? So you're not changing the job, you're not, changing managers, you're not, breaking the bank on it. So it's got to be a reasonable accommodation. For this particular case, not knowing 100% of the specifics about it, it seems like this job would involve that individual going to homes and being really mobile to get into those homes. So maybe going upstairs, or, if there's not an elevator in the house, they have to take stairs. And if she has a walker, that could be pretty difficult for that individual. So in my opinion, I don't know if they're, again, not knowing all the details, it doesn't seem like an accommodation can be made unless the manager is able to, schedule her around apartments that are accessible for her walker. But if the job really is going into homes all across the thing and there's no way to really navigate a perfect schedule for her, there might be some other position that might be available for her, or it just might not be a good fit. when we work with job seekers, one of the, it's often that someone will get hired and be like, oh yeah, I can't do this job, because they can't accommodate me. We've had a couple of those cases before. And we really preach to job seekers is go to a job that you're going to be able to do with a reasonable accommodation. Don't apply for those jobs. If you can't lift over 45 pounds and it says it in the job description, you shouldn't be interviewing for that position. So this one, she was pretty confident that she could have done the job, but it seems like she's definitely having difficulties. So again, it's a sit down opportunity for both the manager, the HR, and that individual to see if it could be a successful opportunity for that person. Again, not knowing all the details, there's a lot more to it, but again, you have to be able to perform that job with that reasonable accommodation. If it's not, then it's not a good fit. Keith, you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, I was on mute. You did a great job, Kevin.
All right, thank you. All right, another question was, do we have any virtual openings right now with our employers? I don't believe so. I know Synchrony has kind of shut off their hiring. They are all working from home at this moment, but they kind of shut down their hiring to support their current workforce. But I know they are working from home, so hopefully when some of this calms down a little bit, there might be some virtual opportunities. Pepsi has those jobs that are either in the stores or in the warehouse, out in the field. They are doing virtual interviewing, I know right now. But as far as we know, Tim, I'll reach out to you, but I don't think we have actually virtual opportunities right now within the Phoenix area. And again, if you have a question, just hover over your menu bar, hit the Q&A button and type it in there. We'll be happy to help you out. All right, looking at a few more. Next question is, I have several. Are there federal mandates that protect the company after they have said no to a candidate with a disability? Federal mandates to protect the company. It's not really. Again, this is kind of a legal question that I like to stay away from because, again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to give you bad advice. But again, as long as you're following, we have the same issue with firing someone with a disability because they can't do the job. We've had a lot of fear of letting that individual stay on and not be successful in the role, and being scared to fire them for discrimination. Again, if you're going through your normal protocols, if you didn't hire a person with a disability because they weren't qualified, as long as you're following that proper process that you do with everyone, you should be okay. That's the normal thing. Again, if they're not fitting, if they didn't answer the interview questions, you have the right notes. Application process is tight. Your hiring process and your firing process is there. It should be pretty case closed there. But again, without getting too legally, that is the best answer I got.
And also, I would add, excuse me, if you're a company, a great way to look at this is, analyze your systems. If they're usually each company has a few separate stages, right? An applicant applies, they go to, online assessment, they have a phone interview, in-person or Skype interview, whatever that process is. Kind of look at the breakdown of those numbers for people who have self-identified. And so if you're seeing that nobody with disabilities who have checked that they've had a disability has got past your online assessment, that's a really huge barrier that you could look at and really improve the process to kind of prevent some of that OFCCP backlash when they come in and audit you and say, hey, you've had thousands of people with disabilities apply and none have gotten past this test. Or whether that is the phone interview or whatever the barriers are. We've seen this with a lot of clients all across the country. There's usually one or two areas where people with disabilities may be adversely impacted and kind of kicked out of the process. And so we encourage you to kind of look at that data and see where folks are dropping out of the process. And if you can keep up a steady flow and folks are making it through the process, you're going to be in much better shape than kind of looking at one-off scenarios. And you'll be able to come back with that data for the OFCCP.
Hey guys, this is Ryan England. I got a couple of questions for you for employers. The first one is, what can we do as employers to help attract people with disabilities to apply for our positions? And then the second question I feel like is very similar to that. what can we do as employers to make people feel comfortable sharing their disability with us and avoid any concerns that they might be discriminated against or not be able to get the job?
Excellent. Yeah. Keith, I'll answer that. You can jump in if you want. But we do this a lot. It's kind of a part of our, how to increase your self-identification campaign. It's more geared towards compliance, but when it comes to it, it really starts with that inclusive environment. So to really go out and start finding the right talent with disabilities, we definitely start with, developing partnerships in your community. Again, Tim Stump's on the phone, perfect example of reaching out to vocational rehab, your Goodwills, your veteran organizations. Start getting involved in the community, start going to events, start reaching out, getting your jobs posted in the right areas, anywhere you can attract and recruit people with disabilities and let them know that you're inclusive. However, if you don't do that and all of a sudden you're not inclusive environment, your systems are good and you don't have people with disabilities working for you now, you don't have an ERG, we like to start internally. So Keith and I's usual suggestion is start with some training. So start educating your leaders and your current workforce. Let them know, what types of disabilities are out there. You're not doing charity employment. That education that makes them comfortable with working with people with disabilities and engaging with people with disabilities as well. So education is really key. Start an ERG. So, you're welcoming to people with disabilities internally if you want people to start talking about their disabilities. Again, it is a personal choice. So if you have an ERG, they can join that. They can be comfortable. And the more comfortable your environment is, the more comfortable they're going to be sharing. And that will definitely reflect externally as well when you start going out and recruiting. We do a lot of discovery work with our new employer clients. So we'll look on their website. There's no imagery of people with disabilities. There's not a separate page for diversity inclusion that highlights people with disabilities. You'll also see a diversity pledge from a CEO from an employer, which leaves out disabilities altogether. We've seen it a few times. So you got to take a look at your branding and how you're getting involved in the community as well. So it's a little internal, external at the same time. But as far as going out and finding that talent, again, I would say go to Voc Rehab first, especially in the Phoenix area. You got one of the best. And then start developing those relationships in the communities. Go to those career events, get it active in the community and start, putting a face to your employer. Keith, anything to add?
Yeah, I would also echo that, getting active in the community and not just, donating dollars for charity purposes, but making connections for employment purposes and recruiting purposes. You've got some great resources on this call already, with Maggie and Tim and a lot of great individuals with community organizations in the Phoenix area. And, training really does cut through some of the myths and stigmas. We like to think that, it's 2020 and we're pretty progressive as far as our thought process, but there's a lot of backwards thinking still around disabilities that we kind of have to squash. And then also if you're a business, it's important to understand that it's not, disability hiring isn't like just this water spout that you just turn on and it, comes out like a full force and it just stays on the entire time. You're going to have to put the effort in and build these relationships, attend events, resume reviews, give these community organizations some love too. In turn, they'll help better recruit for you. As far as self-identifying or checking the box and getting more folks to self-disclose their disability, Kevin was right on with that. As far as your culture, if your culture is toxic for everybody in general, it's going to be even more toxic for people with disabilities. So really kind of getting a true read on your culture, whether that's informal surveys. You don't want to ask people to directly report to you because you're going to get the yes man type response. So you want to informally seek that information about whether you're inclusive. And you can really truly improve a culture on a person by person basis just by incorporating some of that person first language that we talked about, understanding the definition of a disability. But the key is also getting leadership buy-in. And you can get leadership buy-in by kind of showcasing some of these results that we've talked about, where not only are you hiring people with disabilities because it's the right thing to do, but, oh, by the way, you can spend less money with recruiting and hiring because, your turnover isn't as high as it was. So those are pretty powerful arguments to get your leadership buy-in as far as hiring people with disabilities as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. We work with, when we do the outreach for our clients, we'll meet with the HR diversity team And, they think we're just kind of, getting their jobs out there and posting it and kind of doing the compliance thing. When we showed them results and they're like, oh, we hired an engineer. Wow. That's amazing. They start to realize that there is talent within disabilities, and then they go share it with their leadership to be like, hey, this is what we're doing here. And look at these results. I mean, we're hiring people with disabilities in these roles that we typically thought they couldn't. So they get very excited about that. Those results are huge. And one of the attendees on the webinar today just mentioned something too, is, if that company has hired people with disabilities in the past, that usually makes more job seekers and applicants more excited to apply and to close their disability to those organizations. So good word definitely travels fast, but bad it could go the opposite way too. If you're not known for hiring people with disabilities, or you've had a bad incident in the past, that could actually work against you as well. So yeah, just hiring people in general with disabilities will definitely make a huge impact on your recruiting efforts down the line.
That's great. Thank you guys for that. Do you have any more questions on your end? If not, I've got a few announcements and then we can wrap up.
Sure. I think we're about 7 minutes. So again, I'll pop my info up here right now, my contact information if you like. So again, if any questions come down the line, please feel free to reach out to us, info@disabilitytalent.org. We will get any of those questions or concerns or thoughts. So we very much appreciate you having us here today. And again, if there's any questions, just hit that Q&A button. We'll be happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And just a quick little announcement. We're actually going to be sharing this on our YouTube channel. So if you've got anyone you want to share this information with, or if you want to connect anybody that you know with Kevin or Keith, not only do you have their contact information, but you can share this presentation with them at any time. So thank you guys so much. I learned a ton. Just the etiquette part alone opened my eyes to a lot of things. So thank you so much.
Excellent.
All right. So
appreciate it.
Yeah. I've got a couple quick announcements and then we'll wrap up and let everybody get back to it. So let's see here. Here we go. So usually Verily does this part. She wasn't able to attend today. So I just want to make sure we get a quick shout out to Arizona at Work. They do a lot of amazing things with connecting job seekers with employers here in the Valley. So if you want more information or learn about that, arizonaatwork.com. Also, if you know any job seekers that need some resume help, Arizona at Work here has a email address that you can send resume help at maricopa.gov. There's also the arizonajobconnection.gov, careerconnectors.org, and pipelineaz.com. If you want to sign up for a Job Blast newsletter, you can do that by texting AZ at Work, that's AZATWORK, to 22828. You can get started and you can get on their newsletter. You can start getting more information about what's available. Finally, real quick, I just wanted to announce that if you want to join NETPA, our fees are very reasonable right now. These are annual fees, $25 for an individual, $75 for a company or an organization up to 5 employees can be announced as members and can join us in some member-only content that we have. Finally, the last announcement I have is our next event is Friday the 21st. We're going to have an employer panel. If you joined us last month, you get a sense of what that looks like. Well, our goal is to have 5 or 6 employers talking about the opportunities that they have available, things that job seekers can do to stand out, to make sure that their resume actually gets looked at. We can even answer some questions around recruiting, like what are the things that recruiters are looking for right now, so that if you're working with any job seekers, you know any job seekers, they stand a real good chance at being able to get the jobs that they're excited about. So that's all we have for you today. I want to thank Keith and Kevin again. I enjoyed the presentation immensely. It was great information. Reach out to them if you have any questions. If you want to put together a disability inclusion initiative with your organization, or if you know anybody that's working on that, these guys are a tremendous resource. So thank you again for the presentation, and we'll see you guys next month.